Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador. This is From the South. I'm Jose Daniel Lopez. This morning, the International Court of Justice in The Hague ruled against Bolivia in its claim for access to the sea. After reading the details of the judgment for 1 hour, the president of the court delivered the ruling that Chile has no legal obligation to negotiate with Bolivia sovereign access to the sea. He said the judges had reached this decision by 12 votes to 3, but added that this ruling doesn't prevent the two sides from continuing their dialogue in the spirit of good neighbors.
Under Article 3, the court cannot infer from the content of these resolutions, nor from Chile's position with respect to their adoption, that Chile has accepted an obligation to negotiate Bolivia's sovereign access to the Pacific Ocean.
In La Paz and across the country, Bolivians listen intently to the judgment, and in the Plaza Murillo, hundreds watch the court session on giant screens. Many say that in spite of the ruling, they will never give up on Bolivia's demand for access to the sea, a sentiment that was echoed by President Evo Morales when he spoke from The Hague after this decision.
With
paragraph 176, the court understands perfectly that there is an unresolved issue between Bolivia and Chile. There's no obligation, but there's a need not only for these two countries, but for the whole region to resolve this issue between Bolivia and Chile. Bolivia will never stop fighting for access to the ocean.
For his part, Chilean President Sebastián Piñera also spoke about the resolution.
The ICJ has served justice and has put things in their place, clearly and categorically establishing that Chile has never had any obligation on the matter of international rights on its relationship with Bolivia.
Our correspondent in Bolivia, Freddy Morales, brings us more.
The hopes of the Bolivian people were dashed when the ICC ruled against the Andean nation in its dispute with the neighbouring Chile over access to the Pacific Ocean. After 5 years of deliberation, they truly believed the International Court would resolve the feud, dating back to the late 19th century. Since early morning, thousands of people have gathered in this square, anxiously awaiting the word on the resolution. The court's announcement that Chile was not obligated to negotiate granting Bolivia maritime access was met with bitter disappointment. It caused large crowds to disperse. Only a handful of Bolivians remained in the square. Some, however, adopted an optimistic outlook. They say that the Constitution ensures that the Bolivian people can continue their legal fight for sea access. After its defeat by Chile in the War of the Pacific, Bolivia lost 120,000 square kilometers of land and became a landlocked country. People gathered here have told us that they believe the country must remain united as they push forward on a solution. Vice President Alvaro Garcia Linera has said that the tribunal has closed the door, but there are other windows of opportunity still open to Bolivia in its search for an amicable solution.
In a last-minute deal, the United States and Canada have reached an agreement to replace the North American Free Trade Agreement as a trilateral pact with Mexico. Canada will give U.S. dairy farmers access to around 3.5% of its nearly $60 billion domestic dairy market. However, the two countries failed to strike an agreement regarding U.S. tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminum exports, salvaging the $1.2 trillion open trade zone from collapsing. The three countries plan to sign the new U.S., Canada, and Mexico agreement at the end of November.
This is too important, what we're doing, one of the most important deals and the most important trade deal we've ever made by far.
Speaking to the members of the parliament, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said that the deal to modernize the North American Free Trade Agreement is good for Canadians.
What we've moved forward with in terms of labor standards in North America is historic in terms of protecting the rights of workers. What we've moved forward for on the environment is strengthened environmental protections and real consequences within the accord that had never been done before. We are moving forward in a deal that works for the middle class and people working hard to join it, and that is at the heart of the progressive agenda of this government and of this progressive trade deal.
Our correspondent Pablo Perez in Mexico City has more on this story.
So we say goodbye to the North America Free Trade Agreement and hello to the United States-Mexico-Canada agreement, or USMCA. That's how they call it already. Early this morning, the Chancellor-to-be under the new administration, Marcelo Ebrard, made an announcement of how glad they are of the deals that finally ended last night between the United States and Canada on their part of the agreement. Finally, they got on a middle point on the so-called Article 19 about the controversy discussions, and well, we still don't know the details of the agreement. We hope they're going to be published along the day, but they say that the people on the new team and the people on the Luis Videgaray from the Enrique Peña Nieto administration, they say the new conditions are advantageous to Mexico, which is still to be confirmed once we know the details of the United States-Mexico-Canada agreement.
That was Pablo Perez from Mexico. Today was the last day of the general debate at the 73rd session of the United Nations General Assembly in New York. The president of the UNGA, Maria Fernanda Espinosa, wrapped up this year's debate with a speech touching on different topics. More than 140 leaders from around the world have attended to the one-week meeting. 13 leaders spoke today. Among them was Nicaraguan Foreign Minister Denis Moncada, who talked about interference by foreign powers in his country.
Today, once again, we are facing the threat of the United States to curb the social, economic, and cultural development of our people. We denounce this intervention and interference with a bill in the U.S. Congress ordering international financial organizations to oppose the granting of loans to Nicaragua.
Closing up the general debate, Maria Fernanda Espinosa expressed condolences to the people of Indonesia following the devastating earthquake and tsunami. Espinosa also reached out to those affected by other national disasters in the region and beyond.
A country that was afflicted by terrible natural disasters in the last few days. I am deeply moved by the plight of the victims and by the sheer scale of the destruction that has been suffered by this country, to which I bear so much affection. I also express my solidarity to Barbados and Japan for the large-scale disasters that have affected their people over the last few days.
Espinosa also announced that UN member states have ratified the legally binding international agreement to prohibit the use of nuclear weapons towards the goal of total elimination.
7 countries signed and a further 4 ratified the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, thus strengthening the commitment to a world free of the nuclear threat to which we all aspire. These latest steps bring the tally to 69 countries that have signed the treaty and 19 that have ratified this essential instrument.
Our correspondent in New York, Jorge Gestoso, has the latest updates from the General Assembly.
Thank you. This morning here at the UN, the Foreign Minister of Nicaragua, Denis Moncada, was addressing to the General Assembly, and we did have the chance to talk in an exclusive interview with him. He was announcing precisely the interference of the U.S. in the life of Nicaragua, even financially trying to cut their financing, and also he expressed their concern about the changes that he believes that the United Nations need to be done. Also today, Bolivia is taking the presidency of the Security Council. It's a rotative presidency that the U.S. did finish yesterday. Today is for the month of October. It's going to be the turn of Bolivia. And also by the end of the afternoon, the President of the General Assembly, Maria Fernanda Espinosa of Ecuador, is going to give a press conference. We get back to you now.
We'll take a short break now. Join us in a few. Welcome back. Members of Argentina's Central Workers Union are camping outside the National Congress to protest the proposed national budget. They pitched tents outside the building where they vow to remain until Friday, as the national budget is set to be debated throughout the week. They're demanding that the government put an end to prices hikes and budget cuts. Our correspondent in Buenos Aires, Edgardo Esteban, has more.
Protesters have been mobilizing throughout the day and will continue to do so for the rest of the week. State workers assembled in front of the Parliament building. They're rejecting the proposed law outlining the 2019 national budget. If the inflation rate exceeds 23%, this constitutes a recession. This is according to International Monetary Fund's demands. Workers aren't having it. They have taken to the streets to stage various forms of protest action over the next few days. They are also rejecting the agreement between Mauricio Macri's government and the International Monetary Fund.
Brazilian Workers' Party candidate Fernando Haddad visited former President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva in prison on Monday. 6 days ahead of the October 7 presidential elections, the candidate and former president met in prison. Lula has been in jail since April, facing a 12-year conviction that made him ineligible to run for president. The latest polls reveal Fernando Haddad is in second place behind the front-runner far-right candidate Jair Bolsonaro. And on Sunday, the candidates held another televised debate. Several of the candidates paid tribute to the millions of women who marched over the weekend. They were opposing far-right candidate Jair Bolsonaro, who leads the polls. Bolsonaro left hospital at the weekend after he had been stabbed while on the campaign.
It's about defending democracy and defending the rights of women, of workers. This is very important for democracy and for Brazil. Brazil needs to discuss the future, and people are going out into the streets to take ownership of the future.
When I saw Brazilian women agitate and occupy Brazil's streets in their millions, I thought, there is something very healthy, very strong, very beautiful in my country despite a fraction which is civically ill.
A government commission in Mexico has recognized the Tlatelolco student massacre as a crime of state. In October 1968, a student demonstration was violently repressed, leaving 30 people dead, according to official figures. But relatives and activists say the number of deadly victims is close to 400. Mexican President-elect Andrés Manuel López Obrador paid tribute to the young people killed in the massacre.
50 years after the 1968 repression of the youth, in 3 days it will mark 50 years. Here on this historic square, on the Three Cultures Square, we make a commitment to never use, ever again, the army to repress the Mexican people.
Has returned here to the Plaza de las Tres Culturas in Mexico City, almost 50 years from the event that changed his life and the entire nation as well, the so-called Night of Tlatelolco. Here the state repressed with violence the student movement of which he was member of, something that was engraved in history.
People know that here at Tlatelolco, a crime against humanity was committed. A crime of genocide remains unpunished.
The violent event, in which armed and paramilitary forces participated under the president's commands, left an undetermined number of dead people, but also marked the future of social and political movements in the country, which are prepared today to pay tribute to the victims of the massacre.
The commemorations organized by student movements are also protests that follow the slogan, "The victims of 1968 are remembered."
Throughout the city, more than 100 events are planned to remember this historical date. This exhibition used images which during those years were not able to be published because of the government's censorship to explain the student movement.
We are helping other people to understand why the movement was so revolutionary. They really tried to change things. We are remembering their 100 glorious days, 3 months of struggle and resistance.
President-elect Andrés Manuel López Obrador recognized the importance of the anniversary and made a commitment to obtain peace.
Here, in this historical plaza, la Plaza de las Tres Culturas, we make the commitment to never use the army again to repress the people of Mexico.
During the 50th anniversary of Tlatelolco massacre, several social organizations will carry out a demonstration to the Zócalo Square, chanting, "October 2nd will never be forgotten."
The Jamaican government has announced a fundamental economic shift by targeted inflation. According to Prime Minister Andrew Holness, there was too much focus on stabilizing the US dollar, which negatively impact their foreign reserves.
Trying to keep the price of the US dollar stable. Now that comes at a cost. To keep the dollar fixed costs the country in reserves. Because whatever price you try to hold the dollar at, the dollar will only stay there if you have dollars to sell at that price. What we should be doing, and should have been doing this a long time ago, is to focus on keeping inflation, which is the cumulative measure of prices in the economy, stable. And so we have made a fundamental shift in our economic policy from trying to, keep a fixed exchange rate to now inflation targeting.
Sunday marked what will have been the 27th birthday of Bohan John, killed by police in Dallas on September 6th. Family, friends, and supporters held a Thanksgiving birthday march and a ceremony in St. Lucia to mark the occasion. About 200 activists also attended a forum at the St. Paul United Methodist Church in Dallas for what was designed as a call to action.
Yeah, it's difficult today, but as we heard, today would have been his birthday, and he would have celebrated 27 years. It gives me joy just knowing the type of person that both of them had grown up to be. It gives me joy in my heart, despite the fact that we are mourning and we are filled with grief at his loss and the tragedy, the tragic way he was taken from us.
I don't think we will be at peace internally because the case goes on. And we would have to be flying out to Dallas when we are needed up there. Our lawyers will keep us abreast. So I see a long, drawn-out situation, difficult moments. I would have really loved it to go to end now, but I know this is not the way things happen, and I suppose we will be grieving for a very long time.
We'll take a short break now. Don't go away. Welcome back. Mass burials are set to start as the death toll for Indonesian earthquake and tsunami rose to 844. Rescuers are still trying to recover survivors in Palu, the city of 300,000 that was swept by the tsunami. Authorities fear the number of victims could be in the thousands as rescue efforts are yet to reach remote areas. The disaster has also displaced around 48,000 people. A 7.5 magnitude earthquake followed by a tsunami hit the island of Sulawesi on Friday. Palestinians in the city of Ramallah held a general strike against Israel's controversial national state law. Life came to a standstill in these areas as shops were shut down. Government and financial institutions did not open while businesses and schools suspended classes. The strike also marks the anniversary of the deadly October 2000 clashes in which 13 Israeli Arabs were killed by the Israeli police at the start of the Second Intifada. It's 1 year since the October 1st referendum on independence in Catalonia. Thousands of protesters attempted to block roads and train tracks in Catalonia. Others marched in Barcelona to mark the anniversary. The vote in favor of independence led to a heavy repression and a constitutional crisis with the Spanish government in Madrid. At least 9 pro-independence leaders remain in jail. Our correspondent in Barcelona, Joan Ortiz, was at the demonstration.
This is the demonstration called for by the platform of universities in favor of independence. They want to go to the center of Barcelona to support the mandate of the referendum on the 1st of October last year. 2.3 million people voted then. 2.1 million voted in favor of independence, which was then proclaimed but was never implemented. There is a number of simultaneous actions in the city this Monday, not only involving students, but also the committees in defense of the Republic. They have been blocking roads in Barcelona and across Catalonia. At midday, there was a call for workers to stop work for a few minutes and take to the street to support the result of that referendum. And more protests were called for the afternoon, with a large rally at the end of the day outside the Catalan parliament.
Today marks the 69th anniversary of the founding of the People's Republic of China. Major cities in China have been illuminated with colorful lights in celebration of the date. Traditional festival lamps hung along the Lahu Lake, creating a festive atmosphere for visitors. Chinese citizens living across the world are also celebrating the day. Our correspondent in Beijing, Isaura Diez, brings us more.
The Golden Week in China has begun. It's a government initiative designed to extend the celebration of the National Day of the Republic, which is celebrated on the 1st of October. Over the next few days, the Chinese will be traveling within the country to spend time with their families, boosting internal tourism. On October the 1st, 1949, China's Communist Party declared independence People's Republic of China after years of fighting foreign powers. October the 1st remains one of the most significant and important dates in the Chinese calendar, even though they have 5,000 years of history. It marks the transition from occupation and war to a global world power with one of the fastest growing economies. On Sunday, President Xi Jinping paid tribute to the heroes of the Republic at the monument for them in Tiananmen Square. Earlier on Monday, another event took place in the square in front of thousands of people where members of the military raised the Chinese flag.
French singer Charles Aznavour has passed away at the age of 94. Often dubbed as the French Frank Sinatra, Aznavour began his career in the 1940s under the patronage of Edith Piaf in Paris. Charming millions with his unique tenor, he sold more than 100 million records in 80 countries. Born to Armenian parents in Paris, the singer also served as the Armenian ambassador to the UN from 2009. We come to the end of this news brief. These and many other stories, you can find them on our website at telesurtv.net/English. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Jose Daniel Lopez. Thank you for watching.